Okay, so picture this, right? It's 2001. The world is like still kind of reeling from 9/11, and suddenly, bam, this like fresh-faced American kid pops up in the news, captured with the Taliban.
Yeah, wow.
John Walker Lindh,
Yeah.
the American Taliban. But his story, it's a lot more complicated than like the headlines ever said.
Oh, absolutely. It really kind of throws everything we think about, like good guys, bad guys, totally out the window. I mean, Lynn's journey, from this seemingly normal kid in California to like this huge figure in the war on terror. It makes you think, how much do we actually know about what makes people tick, right?
Okay.
Especially with all the noise out there, all the different information.
Right, yeah. It's wild. And will you send over these excerpts from this podcast?
Yeah.
That really go deep on, Lynn's life, and
Yeah.
it's a lot. But to understand how he ended up on a battlefield in Afghanistan, right? We need to go back.
Yeah.
Back to his childhood in Marin County.
Okay, so picture it. Marin County, idyllic, right? Affluent, suburbia.
Right.
Perfect, almost. But Lynn, even there, he was kind of an outsider. Like, didn't really fit in, struggled with feeling lonely, And as a teenager, get this, he was like internet troll. Early days of the internet, but still.
Oh, wow.
It's crazy, right? Because later on, he's the one being scrutinized online.
Yeah. It's almost like, I don't know, foreshadowing or something.
Yeah.
This feeling of not belonging.
Yeah.
And looking for connection in weird places.
Yeah.
And at 16, he finds something. He reads Malcolm X's autobiography.
Right.
And converts to Islam.
And that's where they really start to change. Remember, this is pre-9/11 America.
Mm-hmm.
Islam, it was seen so differently back then.
Oh, yeah, totally.
Not the same fear, not the same prejudice. I mean, his parents, they even thought his move to Yemen to study Arabic was, like a spiritual study abroad kind of thing.
Yeah, you could see them thinking, oh, it's a phase.
Right, yeah.
But in Yemen, it gets more intense, his devotion.
Uh-huh.
He's looking for this pure, like, Islamic community, immersing himself in religious studies. But he's also kind of cutting himself off from anything that challenges those beliefs.
Totally. It's like he's in this echo chamber, right? And he's believing these conspiracy theories, like the U.S. being behind the 1998 embassy bombings in Africa. And it makes you wonder, right, was this fervent belief, was it like real, or was it him just wanting to separate himself from a world that he didn't feel part of anymore?
It's that age-old thing, isn't it? Nature versus nurture. Was he always headed down this path, or did his environment kind of push him there?
Yeah, exactly. And then it gets even more complicated, I guess, when he moves to Pakistan. Imagine, right? No internet.
Right.
I mean, that was his reality. He was getting all his information from pro-Taliban talk radio, and they were painting this romanticized picture of the Taliban, like freedom fighters, totally distorting what they really were.
Oh, wow. So he's basically building his worldview on this totally skewed, limited perspective, like he's in this alternate reality or something.
Right. And that's where his naivete, I guess, really shows. He joins a training camp. He thinks it's just about religious study, even though there are like Al-Qaeda trainees there. It's like he's choosing to see only what he wants to see, blinded by this idea of religious purity.
And that leads into the Al-Ansar unit.
Mm-hmm.
These were Arabic-speaking fighters within the Taliban.
Mm.
But a lot of media reports, they got it wrong. They said it was Al-Qaeda.
Yeah.
And that little mistake, that had huge consequences. It shaped how people saw him.
Totally. It instantly made him into this dangerous terrorist, when in reality it wasn't like that at all. And get this, he actually met bin Laden at the camp.
No way.
Yeah. But his reaction was, it was almost funny, he thought bin Laden was a capitalist.
What?
Yeah, because of how like luxurious his arrival was. He even fell asleep during one of bin Laden's lectures. Can you imagine?
That's wild.
Mm-hmm.
So you have this American teenager, right, deep into Islamic studies, but totally unfazed by the world's most wanted terrorists.
It's like he was totally detached from reality. His focus was so narrow, he didn't understand like the bigger picture at all. He was oblivious.
Yeah.
And his time on the front lines, it was pretty mundane. Mostly guard duty in some remote area. No action. Not exactly the Taliban fighter image, is it?
Not at all. It makes you think, if things had stayed the same, would he have, I don't know, woken up, seen the truth, questioned it all?
Yeah. It's a question we'll never know the answer to.
Okay.
Because, 9/11 happened. And everything changed. Yeah, 9/11, I mean, it changed everything for everyone. And for John Walker Lindh, well, it was like this turning point. He went from, this naive, even if he was misguided, this religious seeker to, well, basically public enemy number one, the poster child for everything America was afraid of after the attacks.
Right, yeah. It's like overnight,
Yeah.
he went from, I don't know, a nobody to like the ultimate traitor,
Yeah.
this symbol of like the enemy within.
Exactly. And the media, they jumped all over at the store. It was perfect for them. American born, converts to Islam, joins the Taliban, instant villain, especially for a country dealing with so much grief, so much fear.
And this is all happening while he's stuck in that prison uprising, right? That we talked about.
Oh yeah. Kala Iyangi prison in Afghanistan. Imagine that. Surviving that, all that chaos, all that death, and then he has to deal with another battle. Public opinion.
And a big part of that, of how people saw him, was that interview, right? The CNN one at the hospital, right after he was rescued. I mean, he's clearly like out of it, on meds.
Well,
he even asks them to stop filming, like over and over.
And they keep going. The journalist even like offers him cookies while he's, asking him these questions, trying to get him to say something incriminating.
It's kind of messed up, isn't it? Like taking advantage of someone in that state just to get a story.
It is. It really is. And they edit the interview to make him look bad. They take things out of context. Like he uses the word jihad, but for him, it was about personal struggle, the religious meaning.
Right.
But after 9/11, that word, it meant something else entirely to Americans. Terrorism. Violence.
So you have this guy, right? He's still trying to process everything he's been through.
Yeah.
And he's using language that people misunderstand.
Right.
And then they use it against him.
Exactly. And then there's the thing about martyrdom. They ask him about it, and he says, it's the dream of every Muslim. But again, it's more complicated than that. It's a nuanced concept in Islam. But they take it as proof that he's, this extremist, when really he was probably just repeating what he learned. And, his education wasn't exactly well-rounded, let's say. But those words taken out of context, they became this huge deal.
It's like they wanted him to be the bad guy.
Yeah.
No matter what.
And the fact that he was white, American-born, it made it worse. It was like this betrayal. It made people question everything. It tapped into this fear of the other, Like, the enemy could be anyone, even someone who looks like us.
And that fear, the media used it, right, to get people riled up.
Absolutely. So they fly him back to the U.S., but even before he gets there, they torture him at Camp Rhino. It was a detention facility in Afghanistan. It's hard to even imagine what he went through there.
Yeah. Solitary confinement. They didn't let him sleep. They wouldn't treat his gunshot wound. Just interrogation after interrogation. They wanted him to break, to confess, to prove he was this dangerous guy.
And the U.S. government, they knew about it. They approved it. John Ashcroft, he was the attorney general then, he said Lindh was an enemy combatant. So he didn't have the same rights as other Americans.
So they could do whatever they wanted to him. Wow. It makes you think, right? How easily they can take away our rights when they're afraid.
Yeah. They needed to look tough. They needed to show they were fighting terrorism. And Lindh, he became the example.
But the thing is, the charges, they weren't that strong when you actually look at them.
Right. Because most of the initial charges, like conspiracy to kill Americans, providing material support to al-Qaeda, even the stuff about the CIA agent who died, Johnny Michael Spann, they dropped all of that.
So what did they actually get him for?
Violating sanctions. Basically giving support to a sanctioned entity, which in this case was the Taliban.
Wait. So after all that, the torture, the media frenzy, they convicted him of something that usually applies to, like, companies, not people.
It shows you how badly they wanted to convict him. They needed a win. And Lindh, they made him into this symbol of evil to make it look like they were doing something.
And they got what they wanted, right. He took a plea deal, so there wouldn't be a trial, right around the 1-year anniversary of 9/11. And they sentenced him to 20 years.
The timing, the place, the whole story around the trial, it was all planned to make people feel like justice was served.
But was it? Lindh's case, it really shows you what can happen when people are afraid. How justice can get, twisted. It's a warning, I think, about power, about the media, about what happens when we're naive in a world full of terror. Yeah. So we've followed John Walker Lindh from, California, his conversion, joining the Taliban, the trial, 20 years in prison. But what about after that? After the media kind of forgot about him.
It's a good question. One that I think a lot of people don't ask. Linth, he basically disappeared. 17 years, a lot of it in solitary.
Yeah.
It makes you think, about punishment. Is it just about like revenge,
Mhm.
or should it be about rehabilitation too,
Yeah.
giving people a chance to change?
17 years. Alone.
Hmm.
Especially for someone who was so young when it all started.
Yeah.
It's hard to imagine what that does to a person.
We don't know a lot about his time in prison, but there are reports. He kept studying religion, learned Pashto, Arabic, even wrote letters to scholars.
Mm.
Some people see that as, him getting even more radical, but it could also be, I don't know, a way to cope, to find something to think about when there's nothing else.
Yeah. Trying to make sense of it all. Even locked up. And then in 2019, he gets out early. Good behavior. But a lot of people were angry. Said he hadn't served enough time
Uh-uh.
for his crimes.
But we got to remember what he was actually convicted of, violating sanctions, not terrorism. And 20 years, that was longer than a lot of other sentences for, even worse stuff related to the war on terror. It shows how powerful public opinion is. People couldn't separate Lind, the person, from the story they'd been told about him.
So he gets out, back to a world that still sees him as, the American Taliban. What then? Does he try to start over, disappear, or does he just go back to those beliefs that got him in trouble in the first place?
That's the big question. He's on probation, strict probation, limited internet. They're watching everything he does. He can't escape what happened. There have been, like, glimpses, letters he wrote saying he supported ISIS. That really scared people, made them think he was still dangerous.
Like he's stuck. Can't get away from his past.
We have to be careful, though. We don't know everything about those letters, what he knew, who was influencing him, maybe, in prison. It's easy to say he's a lost cause, but that's, I think, oversimplifying things. People can change.
John Walker Lynn's story, it's sad, really. A young guy looking for meaning, and, well, it goes terribly wrong. The justice system all messed up because of fear, politics. The media, they just wanted a good story. They didn't care about the detail.
It makes you think, about how we judge people, about how fear can change us, change what we believe in.
The war on terror, it's still with us in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
All the legal stuff, the ethical questions. Lynn's case, it shows that. It makes us think about what we believe, what we read, what we hear, and to question things, not just accept the easy answers.
And, it's a good reminder that everyone has a story. Behind the headlines, the big events, there are real people with their own experiences, their own reasons for doing things.
So think about John Walker Lynn. Think about his story. What does it tell you about, I don't know, about believing in something, about wanting to belong, about how easily justice can be, well, broken in a world that's dealing with extremism and all the stuff that comes after. And join us next time for another deep dive where we'll keep exploring these stories, the stories that make us think
Right.
about the world and about ourselves.